Hi, Joe. Welcome. So I'm joined today by Johanna Robinson, who's the National Advisor to Welsh Government on violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and sexual violence.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Really pleased to be here today.
Now, thank you, Joe, for joining us. You've come along today at the launch of our exhibition, which we have here, the Threads exhibition, which is part of the work that we're doing here around the 16 days of action in relation to the White Ribbon campaign. Mm-hmm. And I'm really keen to find out a little bit more about your role, about the work that you do, and how for you, this is something that is a daily activity that's really important in terms of helping to stem the tide of this epidemic that we're experiencing across the UK.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I wonder if we could start with you just telling us a little bit more about your role.
Okay, so as you said, I'm National Advisor for Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence. It's a very long title, but it tries to be inclusive of all of the broad spectrum of experiences that would describe. I think a lot of people think that excludes men. It doesn't. That's why it includes domestic abuse and sexual violence as parts of it on its own. And my role is under the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act that was created 10 years ago. My role was created as part of that act. And the purpose of the role is to advise ministers on the delivery of the act. I think it's really important to say the core components of that act aren't really complicated. They're not hugely sophisticated. They're about preventing VAWDASV, which is what we call it, from happening in the first place, protecting and supporting those that have experienced it. And it places duties on bodies in Wales to do that. Most significantly, local authorities and health boards, but also all devolved public bodies. And I think my role is then to tell government how that's going, but also then potentially to provide advice to those public bodies in order that they do it better. And I think that isn't a 16 days of the year job. That is all of the time. And whilst I really welcome that we have the 16 days of activism, it's really important that we recognise that people are experiencing this every day and that we need to do things that work for them and prevent and protect and support every day, because that's when it's happening. And if we just wait for these times, so I really welcome having these times and having a spotlight on it, but it's really important that people realise that that isn't enough. You can't just do something in this period and then forget about it. You know, as policing colleagues and everyone will know, it's coming in, it's everyday business. So I really want us to think about that, about what do we learn, what do we commit to in this time that takes us through the rest of the year.
And lots of people say to me, Joe, in terms of my engagement and the activity I have when I go out and meet people, lots of people are very concerned around how this is impacting on younger people in society today, particularly around cultures and attitudes that result in behaviours that are unacceptable.
Yes.
How does your work connect with those young people, and what guidance can you give in terms of to people who may be concerned about this?
So I think, so whilst I mostly work with the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, I work across government. Obviously, education is a significant part of this. So I did, so the relationships and sexuality education can't be the only answer, but it is a significant response, and it is something that Welsh Government have invested in. But I was aware that wasn't reaching all young people. So I did a bit of a review and talked to regional advisors, talked to leads on RSE curriculum, talked to teachers, and I developed a report that went to the Cabinet Secretary for Education and for Social Justice, which talks about that not all children are having an intervention, that it's not consistent across every area of Wales. So we have to be really careful if we're saying we're doing something and it's for everybody, but it actually isn't getting to them. We need to change that. So there has been a change in the model and there's been an investment, but I think we have to do more in that space. I think sometimes, you know, when I spoke to the teachers, what they said was those lessons would be cancelled because the academic lessons would be prioritised. You know, school can be disrupted by different things, can't it? And I think what we have to realise is we're building whole people in school. It is our best opportunity. So we have to do everything to set them on their path. And since we know that so many families will be affected by domestic abuse, and that actually our most significant areas for this to be happening are 16 to 24-year-olds for domestic abuse, and then it's quite a larger age range, I believe, for sexual violence, peer-based sexual violence. So we have to be doing things that speak to those experiences, and they should be our priority group. Not only because it's the biggest opportunity to change things, but it's also the area that's creating the most demand, and in future will create the most demand. So for me, there should be a layered approach. So there's that universal offer of relationship, sexuality, education, but actually we need to be doing other things. So we don't have capacity to take children out of to separate the gender. So that was something that came up. And we know that the conversation with boys needs to be different. They're not going to talk about it in front of the girls in a way that they would, that we would want to. And I also think we need to be braver. So we've had, with regards to the RSE curriculum, there was a judicial review from parents. We have to do some significant work with parents to engage them on this agenda. I think they don't realise, or they don't want to, because I don't want to think of it. I don't want to think of my son looking at porn at a really young age. I don't want to think about it at any point. But the fact that we know that it's happening in primary school, that teachers are telling us that young people are talking about strangulation. We don't want to think of those things, but that's young people's reality. Just today in this room, I was talking to people who, they work in this space, but also people that they love and care about, young people, are having experiences of AI images and fake porn and that kind of thing. So that's what's happening to them. So we need to be braver to talk about that to them in the classroom. But like I said, we need parents to understand that. So potentially we need to be doing the work to educate parents. I think also we can't expect that teachers will get away with teaching this. A lot of kids don't see their teacher in this way, and they won't have those honest conversations. So I think we have to have different approaches to make it a much more normal space to talk about it. But we also need to be thinking about what images are we, what is happening in our children's lives that is normalising that, and how can we disrupt it? And do children know what to do when somebody calls them and threatens them with some of this deep fake porn or something like that? Do they know? Are we actually talking to them about why is strangulation becoming normal? Are we talking to them about what happens if? I mean, a lot of the behaviours that young people do now are normalising some of these things without them realising it. So they're being conditioned. So Snapchat, you can follow all of your friends, you can know their location. So that might seem at the beginning quite a caring thing to just check, but actually they're becoming hypervigilant, they're monitoring, and that would be described as stalking behaviours in a format. So we have to break some of that down for them, I think, because before we know it, we've normalised new things, and we've normalised things that we're trying to change. The behaviours of those have changed, but we haven't changed with it, and we have to do that. So for me, it is really about being real and actually taking a true young person-led approach to this and dealing with the things that they will. If we sit them down, they'll tell us what their experiences are. They'll tell them what the norms are. But we also need to really invest in children's services. So once we go into these spaces and we talk to them, we will very normally reveal some people who are victims in that time or perpetrating some of those behaviours. Now, we wouldn't normally talk about perpetration. I'm talking very specifically, they are committing, they are doing things, they are enabling harm. But what do we have to offer them at that point? Because they need something more than just a universal lesson, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think we're lacking in that. And I really want to see more investment in that, because if we don't stop it then, it's going to grow.
So there's a lesson there for police and crime commissioners then in terms of our early intervention and prevention work that we do, possibly a gap in relation to addressing those perpetrator issues, especially amongst those young people. The scale of violence, sexual violence and domestic abuse is so immense that it's almost hard to grasp, isn't it? What do the figures look like here in Wales, Jo?
So it's really hard because we don't have the disaggregated data, but I think something we talk about is like 1 in 12 people will experience it every year. So we just need to think about that, I think. And I think I find that when we talk about the big numbers, so earlier we heard about the 1.2 million domestic abuse across England and Wales, that I feel becomes too big for people, and it's kind of 100 crimes per minute or something, isn't it? And I think, so if we talk about it like in each classroom, there will be at least 3 children. I prefer to think about it in those ways, because for me, I relate to that much more than these large populations. We know that I think it was 80 women died, in the last year. So we have we have those things that should keep us, I think, keep us placed in that it's really common. We will all know somebody who has this experience, and every woman I speak to has an experience, whether it's street-based harassment right through to rape, every woman without fail will be able to turn to me and tell me something. And I think this is one of the things that I struggle with, is that we talk about the stats, but we haven't changed them. Yeah. So I used to quote stats all the time, and then I thought, why am I doing it? Because I'm not changing anything by doing it. And actually what I want people to think about is you will know someone. So if you know somebody who has these experiences, what are you going to then do about it? Where's your personal responsibility? Because that person you know could be your sister, your mother, your friend. Chances are you will know somebody who's perpetrated these things as well. And I think, so what are you going to do? It might not be the person you know that you have the opportunity to intervene, but if we all do that, then we will all get to somebody's mother, and my mother will be okay, my daughter will be okay. And I think that's what I want us to get to, is to accepting, all of these conversations we've had about women and bear, and the man and the bear, who would you choose? None of it seems to sink in yet. So I'd like us to talk about that. Something for me is, I think we need to have a campaign around that. Like, so if we place one person at the centre and they can talk about all the people that they are connected with, and then how do we intervene? How do we create a community that is hostile to this, that we recognise it and that we intervene?
And 1 in 12, as you say, that means that all of us will know somebody. We'll come across somebody. It might be in the workplace, and as you say, it might be in our own families, maybe even our friends, maybe our colleagues, who are having these experiences. How important is it that we learn from the survivors' voices and listen to their experiences to help us shape interventions going forward?
So I think it's really important that we place the survivor at the centre. I think otherwise we base our work on assumptions, and actually, how do we know that they work? So because we think that if we make something available in a particular way, that's going to be effective, because we somehow have some divine wisdom that's the thing that's going to solve this. And actually, if I think about even like older people, I wasn't that aware of what works for older people. So it's something that I've become more aware of since being in this role. And older people won't respond to the terms domestic abuse, rape, or sexual violence. So we could design whole programs thinking we need to tell them, if you've experienced domestic abuse, come here, talk to us. But actually that's never going to work, because for them that's a particular barrier. They don't identify with that as their experience, so we wouldn't be welcoming in space into them. So I just use that as an example of, without listening to survivors and saying actually what works for them, we aren't going to do those things. And I think if we really want to cut costs, survivors are the ones who will tell us how to do it, because they will say what worked better, what would have worked earlier, and where their expectations were for where the services might help them. And I don't think we do that. I don't think we say, so, if you were to take us back through your experience, what would have been that perfect opportunity? And instead, we think about the places that work within our organisations or work within our spaces. Well, if they don't work for survivors, they're a waste of money, aren't they? Yeah. So I think we always need to include them. And we need to include, like we talk about younger people, we need to bring them into the space as well. I think sometimes we treat them too sensitively because we think that they can't cope with it. Actually, they can. And most survivors don't want anyone to have that experience. So they will get involved because they don't want anyone to, they want to stop it, much as you and I, more so than you and I probably want to stop it. So that's why they will be there in the conversation. And I went to something the other day and a young person said, you need to include us. We're kept out of these spaces because we're young people, but actually we need to be the centre of it. So if our priority is working with children and young people, then we need to find appropriate ways to bring them in. And obviously that needs to be according to what they can manage and all of those kind of things. But how often do we include them in the design of our early intervention and prevention interventions? I don't know truly how much we do that in terms of asking them, what would really work for you? Because I think they would be braver than we are.
Some of the work that we're doing here in Gwent, Jo, is something that's really important to me. for women's safety, and women's safety in terms of the nighttime economy. And we are supporting the rolling out of the Ask for Angela campaign, and we're also working with colleagues here on raising awareness of spiking. Now, many women experience this when they're out, where they should be having a really safe experience with their friends, just being able to enjoy themselves freely. And many women experience this, but what we know is that this is underreported as well. What more can we do to get young women to come forward and tell us about these experiences so that we know that we're targeting the right places?
So I think anonymous reporting will be a big part of it, but I suppose if it's stepping before that, we know one of the biggest reasons for underreporting in any space is the normalisation of it. So to be harassed on a night out, I would argue that most women would think would be part of it. Again, this is something we haven't changed. And I think, so we have to have campaigns that talk about that and accepting that happens. So I think a lot of back maybe 10 years or so ago, we'd see the women like sprawled on the toilet floor saying, were you left by your friends, or did you drink too much, and things like that. And actually we need the alternate thing that says, we know this happens, speak out. But I think also people need to have faith that there will be a response. So I'm a firm believer in procedural justice. All consultation with victims of any crime will say that they want procedural justice, which means that they want to be respected, they want to be communicated with, they want information. I think in spiking, what we've been proven, and a lot of, in a busy nighttime economy kind of scenario, it's going to be hard to identify individuals and that kind of thing. So I think we have to be careful that we might not be able to bring the criminal justice outcome, but there are other things that we can do. So are we advertising those other things that we do, where people are asked to leave clubs, where maybe, the sharing of information about when somebody's known to be harassing individuals, that you might not be able to get a police outcome, but actually, is there something that we can do to I think, with regards to women exploited through sex work, there's been an ugly month scheme, other things like that we can do, that we can advertise to women so that they can have confidence that it's worthwhile. Because otherwise, I think sometimes people forget that once you talk about something, you have to accept it's happened. So a lot of people don't do that because they normalise it as part of something that just goes on. It didn't harm me, so I'm not going to say anything, and I'm all right. Actually, underneath that, their subconscious, there will be something that's going on for them, won't there? So in order for us to feel that it's worth raising that for ourselves, it's worth going through the hassle, the trauma, all of these complex feelings we might have in speaking out, we need to know that there's something worth it at the end of it. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of a broad spectrum of what would be considered to be lower level, violence against women and girl offences, we don't often deliver results. But those results, like I've said, they might not be criminal justice ones. Do people know that there are people trained, on the doors and things like that? That's something that we have now, isn't it? Are people aware of that? I think we should be promoting those things so that we have that culture of safety that people can have confidence in. I know it exists. So if I see somebody, and I'm also do the job I do, if I see somebody acting in a predatory way, then I go and tell somebody working in the place, because I have the confidence that they'll do something about it. I don't think that person's going to end up in a police station. I think they're going to be checked out. But that creates that culture of hostility. My daughter, by virtue of being my daughter, knows the same. So unfortunately, like me, her nights are spoiled because she also sees some of those behaviours and she reports them. So I think it's about that. It's about that activity and promoting that. And I think even sometimes blurred images or things like that, but in some of these spaces saying, like, we removed 10 men in the last week or something along those lines. So there's some kind of measure of accountability that people can have faith in.
I think it's really important, isn't it, to have that confidence. People can have confidence. One of the challenges for us within the criminal justice system particularly, but policing primarily, is the lack of confidence people have in the police taking these issues seriously due to the appalling behaviour of some individuals within policing. How can we help to support the development and improvement of trust and confidence in policing, because we've had some very high profile cases, but on a daily basis, that's certainly not my experience.
No, I think, you know, and as you know, I worked here too, and I think it makes me really sad that we decide whole organisations now, you know, must have so many perpetrators in them. And of course, that's not true. I think what we need to recognise is people in policing are members of the public, like in any place. And if any organisation, and I'm not minimising the things that have happened, but if any organisation thinks they don't have an issue, you know, and there aren't perpetrators, that there will be. So no organisation, none of us should be naive or ignorant enough to be thinking that we don't have to do something about it. So I think things that should happen in policing should happen everywhere. I think, you know, having those robust policies and procedures, and what we see is there is action taken now, isn't it? And I do think it's really important that those things are covered. What we need is the public to understand that means that things are changing, rather than they are, you know, hearing about things because it's so bad. I think some of the things I, you know, would like to see is, you know, does the public understand that people are losing their jobs because they can't, you know, because they've done these things? Again, for me, it's back to that accountability. But I think it's also about those positive actions that policing are taking. And I don't think we see enough of that, actually. And I think I would like, and some of this is down to journalism, isn't it? And I think we've got into some really negative spaces with journalism that make us all even more scared. And we think that there's, you know, across a whole broad spectrum of things in the violence against women and girls space, we see all of the things where somebody's done something and got away with it. Well, actually, what about where, you know, action is taken, and where police officers are doing good things, and also advertising? I know, you know, there will be survivors who will speak highly of police officers, and I imagine, you know, in particularly the rape specialist teams, there will be people who will feel hugely grateful for the experiences they've had. So I'd like to see more positive promotion, because that's how we get the confidence. You know, that there were some people, I remember years ago, with regards to the operation with young people who were exploited, you know, it was a police officer that a young person identified as the person they trusted. It wasn't anybody else. It wasn't youth workers. It wasn't family members. It was a police officer in her dedication. And I'd like to see more promotion of those things. That's what's made a difference. Because otherwise people struggle to visualise what is it positively that police officers are bringing. Instead, what we see is, oh, look, there's another one who's done some awful things. And that doesn't help anybody, does it? And I've heard, you know, specialist services, after the Metropolitan Police coverage, you know, they were really disappointed that coverage got out there, because they want to be able to lean on criminal justice services. They want to refer people to criminal justice services, and it's going to be hard when people don't have confidence. And we do need to recognise that a lot of the issues are held in one police force, or, you know, one area. That doesn't mean that all police forces are that way. But that's, again, it's a challenge, because we get the reporting as if it is something that happens in your patch, isn't it? It's something that happens in your area. So I would really like, I suppose my message is to journalists in this space, because actually I think if you have responsible reporting, you should be doing things. How do we create a better society? Well, we create a better society by people having confidence in criminal justice services. So yes, report on the stuff where it doesn't go well, but also try to create some balance, because not everything's bad all of the time. And there are people who are being served well in this community.
And here in Gwent, the Chief Constable and I are working really closely to improve trust and confidence in Gwent Police.
Yeah.
And addressing issues such as violence against women and girls is a priority within my police crime and justice plan. And that means not just supporting people to think about these issues in a different way, as the way that this exhibition does here today, but also investing in those services that support people. But for me, the early intervention and prevention activity that we invest in is very, very important, because I do feel that if we are to change these attitudes, then we need to invest there and try and address these issues very early on. So, Jo, thank you so much for joining me today and to talk about all of these issues. One thing that comes out very powerfully from our discussions is your passion and your commitment to this. And something that I've learned while I've been undertaking this role is the strength that we have when we act together. So thank you so much for leading the way and working together with us on this issue.
Thanks very much for your time.